When the world is still and the darkness hasn't yet surrendered to dawn, something extraordinary happens. Heaven leans in that fragile moment before noise rises and life demands your strength. One decision has the power to change everything. Inviting God first into your day. This simple act is not a whisper into silence. It is a declaration into eternity. It summons strength you haven't yet felt, peace you didn't know you needed, and protection you cannot see but will experience. Before your feet touch the floor, before fear has a chance to speak, God stands ready to step into your story. If you open the door, in the earliest hour of the morning, while the world is wrapped in quiet, something sacred begins to stir. The sky holds a faint glow as dawn approaches, and everything seems suspended in a holy pause. This is the fragile, untouched silence before the world awakens. As the first breaths of the day rise, the heart senses a gentle trembling, an inner awareness that something greater is drawing near. In this stillness, heaven seems to lean close, almost brushing against the edges of human thought. The atmosphere carries a weight of expectancy. The darkness of night softens, revealing the first signs of light. Shadows retreat, and with them, the worries carried from the previous day begin to loosen their grip. It is here, in this quiet threshold, that the soul feels the invitation to rise, to breathe, to reach upward. The room is still, but the spirit is awakening. Before the demands of the day can shout for attention, a whisper calls within, urging the heart to seek God first. The morning becomes a sacred doorway, one that opens not with noise, but with intention. As awareness sharpens, the realization settles that this moment is no accident. Every sunrise is a divine appointment, an opportunity to choose who will guide the hours ahead. To invite God first is to declare that the day belongs to Him, and that His presence will shape every step. With a steady inhale, the soul responds. The heart opens, the mind steadies, and the first thought of the morning becomes a prayer. In this dawn-lit stillness, the day is placed into God's hands, and the journey begins with heaven's whisper leading the way. The silence of dawn still lingers as the soul steps forward from its awakening. The invitation sparked in the early morning now draws the heart deeper, urging it to move from awareness into encounter. The world remains hushed, but something powerful begins to gather in the unseen. What began as a whisper strengthens into a pull, an unmistakable call toward God's presence. The heart, already stirred from sleep, senses that this is no ordinary morning. It is a moment charged with spiritual electricity, as if heaven has positioned itself directly at the threshold of the day. Light continues to seep gently into the room, soft but persistent. Each inch of illumination feels intentional, as though creation itself is guiding the spirit toward communion. The soul stands between what was and what can be, aware that the next step will determine the tone of the entire day. There is a shift, subtle yet heavy with significance. The stillness no longer feels empty but inhabited. It is as if the presence of God, patient and waiting, fills the room with a quiet majesty. A holy weight descends, not to burden, but to assure. The heart responds instinctively. The body doesn't move, yet everything inside draws closer to divine nearness now unfolding. Thoughts that once scattered begin to settle, aligning themselves like stars being pulled into order. Peace drapes over the mind with deliberate gentleness. The moment grows. It becomes impossible to ignore the sacred pull, the noise of the upcoming day. Its demands, its unpredictability, suddenly seems distant and powerless. What dominates now is the awareness that God is here, ready to be invited fully into the center of everything. A holy urgency rises, not the urgency of fear or pressure, but of opportunity. The realization strikes that entering God's presence first is not simply a spiritual routine. It is a lifeline, a strategy of victory, a shield against the unknown battles waiting beyond the front door. Then comes clarity. The soul recognizes that this early encounter is a foundation upon which the day will stand or fall. To begin with God is to place the day under His authority. To delay is to risk walking into the world unarmed, unanchored, and unaligned. The choice is clear and compelling. With a heart growing bold, the spirit steps inward. Words form, not loud, not rehearsed, but honest and weighty. They drift upward like incense, rising into the atmosphere thick with God's presence. This is a crossing point, where awareness turns into worship and worship into surrender. And so the door opens. The soul, awakened by dawn and drawn by presence, enters into communion with the one who designed the day. A new chapter is unfolding, not just in the story, but in the spirit of the one praying. What began in stillness now strengthens in surrender, preparing the path for everything that comes next. The moment the soul steps into God's presence, the atmosphere shifts again, this time with force. What was peaceful and gentle now carries a sharp edge, as though the unseen world has taken notice. Every step closer to God stirs a reaction, and the remnants of night push back. A quiet tension settles, not to intimidate, but to reveal the truth. Every morning holds a battlefield. What seemed like ordinary stillness now pulses with spiritual conflict. The heart feels the contrast, God's nearness on one side, the weight of lingering darkness on the other. The shadows do not vanish easily. Doubts emerge, memories whisper, yesterday's burdens try to rise like smoke. These are not accidents. They are the last attempts of darkness to reclaim the territory that dawn is stealing away. The soul recognizes the struggle, embraces itself. But this time, the heart is not unprepared. The grounding formed in chapter 2 becomes armor. The awareness of God's presence becomes a shield. The soul stands taller, remembering that light does not bow to darkness. Darkness flees from light. The morning prayer becomes a weapon. A surge of resolve floods in. What once felt heavy now feels confrontable. The spirit begins to resist every whisper of fear, every echo of worry, every trace of yesterday's weight. Each breath becomes defiance. Each thought turns into declaration. The soul pushes back. Then, almost suddenly, the light inside grows stronger. It presses against the invisible resistance, expanding, shimmering, refusing to shrink. The divine presence lingering in the room intensifies, filling the atmosphere with an authority the darkness cannot imitate. The battle sharpens, not with noise, but with revelation. The heart realizes that the struggle itself is proof of movement. Darkness only resists when something powerful is approaching. What feels like pressure is actually breakthrough announcing itself. The presence of God rises like a tide, washing over the mind, clearing the fog, dissolving the invisible weight. The conflict weakens. The air seems to clear. The heart feels lighter. What tried to intimidate now appears small, fading, shrinking, unable to endure the expanding light. And then victory begins to settle in. It doesn't arrive with a shout, but with a shift, quiet, unmistakable, triumphant. The soul stands where the shadows once lingered, but now the light reigns uncontested. The breakthrough is not loud, but it is absolute. As the last traces of darkness retreat, the soul stands in clarity and strength. Morning has conquered night, and prayer has claimed the day. The heart knows now. Nothing that rises today can overpower what God has already defeated in this dawn encounter. The day begins not in weakness, but in victory. As the darkness breaks and the soul stands victorious, a new sensation rises. Strength not born of self, but poured from above. The air seems charged again, not with conflict this time, but with empowerment. What was once a battlefield now becomes holy ground where God equips his child for the day ahead. The heart feels a steady surge, as if heaven itself is fitting invisible armor piece by piece. Courage settles in first. Firm and steady, it anchors the spirit, reminding the soul that fear has already been defeated in the dawn's first light. The victory of the morning begins to solidify into confidence. Next comes clarity. Thoughts sharpen. Confusion lifts like mist under rising sunlight. Decisions that felt tangled now appear straightened, aligned, illuminated. The soul senses direction taking shape, not from human effort, but from divine order quietly unfolding within. Strength deepens further. It is not loud, not overwhelming, but powerful in its stillness, like a river flowing beneath the surface, unstoppable and steady. Every weakness that tried to cling to the spirit begins loosening. Every doubt that whispered in the early hours now falls silent. The presence of God surrounds the soul like a protective barrier. It is felt in the breath, in the heartbeat, in the grounded calm that now defines the morning. What nearly overwhelmed just moments earlier now seems distant and powerless. This strength is not merely recovery. It is preparation. The spirit senses a holy commissioning. The day ahead is no longer something to endure, but something to conquer. Tasks, challenges, conversations, responsibilities. Each one feels manageable under God's covering. The soul recognizes that this divine strength is not random. It is intentional provision. A sense of boldness grows. The heart feels capable of stepping into moments that once caused hesitation. The empowerment is unmistakable. It is the kind that transforms hesitation into action, uncertainty into determination, and quiet faith into confident movement. As this divine strength continues to build, gratitude rises naturally. Not forced, not rehearsed, just a spontaneous recognition that God has stepped into the morning in fullness. The soul feels held, guided, fortified. This is more than spiritual renewal. It is a divine partnership for the hours ahead. Then comes an even deeper certainty. God is not merely strengthening the soul. He is walking with it. The day will not be navigated alone. Every step, every decision, every moment will be carried by the one who has already conquered the dawn's darkness. With this understanding, the soul stands ready. The morning prayer has moved from awakening to presence to breakthrough, and now to empowerment. Strength has been given not just to survive the day, but to shape it. And as the morning light fully claims the sky, the heart knows the journey has only begun. As the soul stands fortified by the strength God poured into the morning, another shift begins, gentle yet authoritative. It feels like the atmosphere itself rearranges, as though unseen hands are aligning something far beyond human capability. The empowerment of Chapter 4 now settles into divine direction. The heart senses a pull, not chaotic or confusing, but deliberate. Thoughts that once scattered now move into formation, guided by a wisdom deeper than the soul could access on its own. God's presence, no longer only strengthening, begins to guide. The day ahead starts taking shape with supernatural precision. It becomes clear that this alignment is not just internal. Something is happening beyond the room, beyond the quiet morning. Something in the path ahead. The soul can almost feel the orchestration. Doors positioning themselves to open, obstacles shifting aside, favor being set in motion. Heaven is preparing the route. The awareness of God's involvement intensifies. This is more than guidance. It is strategic placement, like a divine compass turning toward true north. The heart feels pulled toward the right conversations, the right decisions, the right moments. Nothing about this morning feels accidental. Clarity sharpens again, but now it carries direction. The soul knows where to step and where not to. What once felt pressing no longer matters. What once felt distant suddenly becomes significant. The spirit is highlighting priorities, removing distractions, and illuminating purpose with soft but unstoppable light. A sense of calm authority settles on the heart. There is no rush, no panic. The alignment God brings does not hurry. It flows. It is the still confidence that comes from knowing that every moment of the day has already been seen by the one who guides it. Chaos loses its power in the face of such divine order. The soul feels the subtle unfolding of a plan bigger than the morning itself. Conversations will happen today that matter. Decisions will be made that shift direction. Encounters will unfold that are not coincidence, but heaven-timed appointments. The spirit senses it all rising like dawn breaking a second time. Gratitude deepens, this time with awe. It is one thing for God to strengthen a soul. It is another to align its entire path. The heart recognizes the privilege of being guided by a God who not only walks with his children, but goes before them. This realization turns a morning into a sacred strategy session. The alignment becomes almost tangible. It feels like invisible hands placing the pieces of the day exactly where they belong. A confidence grows, not self-confidence, but God-confidence. The soul is no longer stepping blindly into the hours ahead. It is stepping into a path crafted with intention. With one final moment of stillness, the heart responds to the divine order settling over the day. The dawn that awakened the soul now leads it with purpose. Strength has become direction. Presence has become strategy. And as the morning continues to unfold, the soul understands. This is divine alignment, and the day will follow heaven's design. The alignment that settled over the morning begins to intensify, expanding beyond the soul and into the very atmosphere of the coming day. What felt internal now stretches outward, as if heaven itself has shifted into motion. The sense of divine order becomes a doorway to divine opportunity. There is a powerful awareness that something has changed, something beyond emotion or intuition. It feels as though heaven's ceiling has opened and spiritual activity is rising like a strong current. The alignment of chapter 5 was preparation. Now comes movement. Now comes breakthrough. The soul can almost hear the turning of unseen hinges as doors that once seemed sealed begin to unlock, not with force, but with favor, not through striving, but through God's orchestration. It becomes clear that the one who aligned the path is now clearing it, widening it, and blessing it. A sense of acceleration enters the moment. What felt delayed for months suddenly feels possible. What felt out of reach now seems within grasp. There's a holy momentum building, quiet but unstoppable. Every step of obedience taken earlier in the morning begins producing ripples of grace. This movement is not chaotic. It is precise. Opportunities begin to form like constellations, each one placed with divine intelligence. The soul senses blessings assembling ahead, conversations being arranged, answers drawing near. The alignment God set in place is now opening gateways of favor. The heart feels lifted by a confidence not rooted in self, but in the clear evidence that God is working ahead of the day. Burdens loosen. Anxiety fades. The soul realizes that success today is not dependent on effort alone, but on the supernatural groundwork already laid by heaven's hand. Then a deeper revelation settles in. God is not just opening doors. He is walking through them first. He is stepping ahead into situations unseen, softening hearts, preparing solutions, removing barriers. The soul feels protected by the knowledge that no battle today will be faced without divine presence leading the way. The atmosphere grows thick with expectation. The morning no longer feels like preparation. It feels like activation. Light expands, filling every corner of the inner world, spilling outward into the day that is unfolding. Favor becomes not just a hope, but a sensation, something felt anticipated, almost visible. Gratitude rises again, now mixed with awe and boldness. The soul understands that open heaven is not merely symbolic. It is a spiritual reality shaping the physical world. This is what happens when God is invited into the dawn. Doors open that no one can close, and the impossible begins to bow. As the chapter draws to a close, the soul stands ready to step into a day already touched by heaven. Alignment has led to movement. Strength has become favor. Presence has transformed into breakthrough. And with heaven's doors now open, the heart knows that the day ahead is marked by divine encounter. As heaven's doors swing open and divine movement surges ahead, a new presence settles over the soul, gentle, yet filled with authority. It is the sense that God is not only guiding and preparing the day, but also consecrating it. The open heaven of chapter 6 now becomes a covering, a benediction spoken by the King himself. The atmosphere grows still again, but this stillness is different from dawn silence. This is a stillness of blessing, a heavenly calm that descends like a warm mantle. It feels as though God is wrapping the soul in protection, marking the day with his approval before the first earthly step is taken. The heart senses God's hand resting upon it, steady and reassuring. Peace floods in thicker and deeper than before. This is not simply inner peace. It is divine shielding. Worry cannot penetrate it. Fear cannot cling to it. It is the unmistakable settling of God's favor upon the morning. Then comes the blessing of the mind. Thoughts once vulnerable to anxiety now feel fortified. Clarity remains sharp, guarded by divine wisdom. The mental battles that usually erupt at midday lose their power before they begin. The mind stands under God's covering, protected from distraction and confusion. Next, the blessing extends to the words that will be spoken throughout the day. It becomes clear that conversations, decisions, and interactions are being sanctified before they happen. The soul feels a divine restraint against harmful words and a divine release toward healing ones. God is guarding the tongue. The blessing moves deeper, touching the emotions. The heart feels steadied, anchored, resilient. This is the kind of emotional covering that does not crumble under stress or pressure. Joy settles in, not loud, not hyperactive, but steady, mature, grounded. It becomes a silent strength within. The protection expands outward. The soul senses that God is placing a hedge around the day's travels, meetings, responsibilities, and unknowns. Every unseen danger, every hidden trap, every unexpected challenge stands no chance against the blessing God is sealing over the day. Then comes the assurance that no weapon formed today will prosper. The declaration rises from deep within the spirit, not spoken aloud, but felt like fire in the bones. The soul knows it carries divine immunity, not from hardship, but from defeat. God has already gone before, and now he surrounds. Gratitude rises once more, humbled and astonished. The benediction of the morning feels like a crown placed gently upon the head, a reminder that the day is not ordinary. It has been prayed over, aligned, empowered, and now sealed with God's covering. Nothing about this day is left to chance. With the benediction of the morning still resting like a crown upon the soul, the first steps into the day feel transformed. Nothing outward has changed yet. Buildings stand the same. The world hums with its usual rhythm. But internally, everything is different. The soul walks forward carrying heaven's imprint. The sense of God's covering remains thick, almost tangible. Every breath feels empowered. Every motion feels intentional. This is not the weary walk of survival, but the confident stride of victory. The day does not intimidate. It yields. Challenges do not loom. They weaken under the weight of divine presence. As responsibilities begin to unfold, the alignment from earlier chapters activates like a living map. Conversations flow with grace. Decisions come with clarity. Unexpected obstacles arise but collapse quickly, unable to withstand the strength and order God established at dawn. The soul moves with a rhythm set by heaven. Even moments of tension or pressure are met differently now. Instead of fear rising, faith rises. Instead of anxiety tightening the chest, peace deepens its grip. What would have drained energy now becomes opportunities to witness God's hand guiding each moment. Victory does not merely appear, it follows. Opportunities begin to open, some subtle, others unmistakably divine. People speak words that confirm what the Spirit revealed in the morning. Doors open that were once sealed. Timings align with supernatural precision. The soul recognizes the unmistakable footprint of a God who moves ahead of his children. Strength flows continuously throughout the day, not in bursts but in a steady stream. What began in chapter 4's empowerment now manifests as endurance and resilience. Fatigue tries to whisper, but it has no authority. The morning's strength becomes afternoon's fuel and evening's stability. There is also a new awareness. Every victory unfolding is not human triumph, but divine partnership. The soul walks with God, not behind him, not ahead of him. Each moment feels guided. Each step feels protected. The companionship of the Almighty becomes the quiet anthem beneath every breath. As the hours pass, gratitude keeps rising, surprising even the heart itself. Small blessings feel significant. Ordinary moments feel sacred. The soul realizes that the true victory of the day is not just what God opens, fixes, or arranges. It's the unbroken connection with him that began at dawn. By the time the sun begins its descent, the evidence of the morning prayer is undeniable. The day has not been perfect, but it has been victorious. Not because everything was easy, but because nothing was faced alone. Every challenge was met with strength. Every decision was guided. Every moment was covered. And so the day closes the same way it began, in God's presence. The soul reflects on the journey and recognizes the truth. Inviting God first did not simply change the morning. It changed the entire day. Victory became the natural outcome of communion. Peace became the atmosphere. And every hour bowed to the one who was welcomed at dawn. As the final shadows of evening stretch across the horizon, the victories of the day begin to settle in the soul like embers still glowing from the fire of God's morning presence. The triumphs, the protected moments, the divine timings, all of it rises again in memory as the heart prepares to close the day the same way it opened it, with God. The atmosphere shifts not into heaviness, but into holy reflection. It is a quiet after battle, the calm after motion, the sacred pause where heaven invites the soul back into communion. The presence that carried the morning's strength and the afternoon's clarity now waits gently at the door of night. The soul feels a familiar pull, this time softer, like a whisper calling from a safe place. The same God who walked through the day now extends his hand to gather every victory, every burden, every unanswered question into his eternal stillness. Nothing needs to be held alone. A deep peace begins to move through the heart, richer than the morning peace, thicker than the midday calm. This peace carries the weight of everything God has already done. It is not the peace of preparation, but the peace of completion. The day has been covered, guided, and sealed. The soul becomes aware of a holy exchange waiting to happen. The weariness accumulated from tasks, responsibilities, and human limitations is gently drawn into God's presence. In return, he pours rest, not only for the body, but for the mind and spirit. It is a divine restoration that night was designed for. Moments of the day flash before the inner eye. Conversations that held grace, decisions that carried clarity, obstacles that shattered in the presence of God's guidance. Each memory becomes evidence of God's nearness. The soul feels gratitude rising, powerful and unrestrained, like a river breaking through a dam. Then, a deeper awareness surfaces. Victory is not only measured by what was overcome, but by who remained present. God never stepped away. Not once. Through stress, noise, uncertainty, and unexpected challenges, his covering stayed. His alignment held. His strength flowed without interruption. The heart trembles with awe. As the night deepens, the soul leans fully into God's presence. No facade, no pressure, no performance. Just genuine communion with the one who authored the day and now invites the heart to rest in his timing. This nightfall intimacy feels like a holy exhale, the spirit releasing everything into his hands. The divine presence settles like warm light filling a quiet room. It feels like being wrapped in a mantle of security, assurance, and love. The same God who awakened the dawn now calms the night. The day ends where it began, under his shadow, in his strength, with his peace ruling over every corner of the heart. And as the final moment of the day fade into silence, the soul understands something profound. Victory is not a moment. It is a lifestyle. It is the unbroken pattern of beginning with God, walking with God, and returning to God. Night becomes not the ending of blessing, but the preparation for tomorrow's dawn. Fresh reports arrive from the quiet edges of a new morning, revealing a startling development. The soul that ended yesterday exhausted has awakened today with fire it cannot explain. Analysts observing the shift note that something happened in the night, something unseen, something holy. What was weary now pulses with readiness. What trembled now rises with resolve. It appears the invitation made at yesterday's dawn has ignited momentum that refuses to die with sunset. Sources close to the heart testify that God did not merely walk through the day. He worked through the night. While fears slept, he stood guard. While doubts whispered, he countered them with promises older than time. And now, as the first early light presses against the horizon, there's a sense of movement, like heaven is not simply watching but preparing to act again. Officials on the spiritual front lines report signs of a brewing shift in atmosphere. The air feels charged, as if the Almighty has positioned new mercies along the path ahead. They shimmer like invisible banners, waiting for the believer to step forward and claim them. Nothing about this morning feels ordinary. Everything feels orchestrated. Eyewitnesses describe a heart standing at its window again, just as it did on the very first chapter, but this time with a deeper understanding. The invitation to God is no longer a ritual. It is a lifeline, a headline, a declaration that the day will not command the spirit. The spirit will command the day. Yet tension runs beneath the surface. Reporters embedded in the subconscious confirm that yesterday's challenges left lingering wounds. There are unanswered questions, unresolved storms, unfinished battles waiting in the hours ahead. The world has not magically softened, but something within the believer has strengthened, and that alone changes the battlefield. Insiders close to the soul reveal a moment of trembling honesty, the awareness that without God leading, the day will devour them. But with God, the day must bow. It must rearrange itself around divine order. There is power in knowing that heaven responds to an invitation, and responds quickly. The first prayer of this new day rises, not as a whisper but as a rallying cry. It shakes the quiet. It commands attention. It becomes a headline in the unseen realm. God, Come again. Be first again. Take this day again. The declaration echoes like thunder across the spiritual landscape, and all forces, light and dark, take notice. Strategists analyze the unfolding pattern and see a profound truth emerging. When God is invited at dawn, the day bends. Circumstances shift. Strength returns. Fear retreats. And even when chaos tries to rise, it cannot overthrow what heaven has already claimed at sunrise. Meanwhile, hope, previously fragile, solidifies. It stands taller than yesterday. It walks with confidence borrowed from the Almighty Himself. Reports describe it as luminous, anchored, and unshakable. This is no temporary emotion. This is a transformation. And so, with a deep breath that feels like a beginning, not a continuation, the believer steps into a new day under a sky that seems brighter than usual. Because it is. Every sunrise looks different when God is invited first. Authorities on the spiritual front have issued an urgent bulletin this morning. Although the dawn arrived radiant with hope, conflict has erupted swiftly and without warning. Internal sensors within the heart picked up movement beneath the surface. Old fears attempting a counterattack. Try to reclaim territory surrendered to God at sunrise. The timing is no coincidence. When heaven advances, darkness resists. Correspondents stationed deep within the mind report that the first signs of unrest began with a single anxious thought. Small, subtle, seemingly harmless. But its impact rippled rapidly, stirring doubt, tension, and a faint sense of spiritual fatigue. Experts warn this is a common tactic. The enemy does not strike loudly at first. It whispers. It tests the believer's resolve. Yet early reports confirm something remarkable. Instead of collapsing under pressure, the Spirit responded with an alarming surge of strength. Strength that analysts insist does not belong to human willpower alone. It appears yesterday's invitation, last night's covering, and this morning's renewed cry have fortified the believer more than expected. As the internal storm intensifies, observers note a startling contrast. The heart is under attack, yes, but it is also anchored. The waves rise, but they do not capsize. Fear presses in, but faith pushes back with equal force. A dramatic stalemate unfolds, and heaven watches closely. Meanwhile, new data emerges from the soul's command center. The believer is remembering who walked with them through yesterday's turmoil, remembering whose presence wrapped around them in the night, remembering the God who answered the dawn not once, but twice. This memory triggers a shift in the battle's momentum. Onlookers from the unseen realm report that the atmosphere suddenly changes. The trembling stops. The heartbeat steadies. A clarity sweeps the mind like a wind-blown flame rising stronger, not weaker. The believer is no longer fighting alone. They are fighting aware. With renewed confidence, the believer issues a bold declaration, quiet but thunderous in the spiritual world. God, take this moment too. Not just the dawn, not just the morning. Take this battle. The words echo like weapon fire, cutting through the thick fog of doubt. Response teams from heaven immediately mobilize. Peace begins pouring in like reinforcements arriving on the front line. Strength returns not gradually, but like a wave crashing. Even the darkest thoughts retreat, exposed and disarmed by divine authority. Analysts now conclude that the attacks were not a sign of weakness, but a sign of progress. Resistance only rises when territory is being taken. The enemy does not fight what is not a threat. And this believer, strengthened by dawn prayers, covered through the night, and awakened with purpose, has become a threat indeed. By the end of the hour, surveillance from the spiritual realm reveals the scene stabilizing. The storm fades. The heart lifts. Faith stands. And the news headline emerging from chapter 11 is clear. The believer who invites God at dawn does not walk into battle defenseless. They walk in victorious. New reports flood in from the inner battlefield, confirming that the earlier conflict in chapter 11 has triggered a remarkable chain reaction. What began as a defensive stand has now evolved into an unexpected spiritual advance. Analysts observing the believer's condition note a rising boldness, an authority settling over them like armor freshly forged. It's as if the very struggle awakened a strength they never realized they carried. Correspondents stationed near the heart confirmed that peace. which earlier arrived in gentle waves, is now forming a wall, firm, unmoving, impenetrable. This is no passive calm. This is strategic calm, the kind that signals something in the believer has shifted from survival to command. They are no longer reacting to the battle. They are influencing it. A sudden announcement from the soul's command center reveals the source of this transformation. The believer has begun declaring God's promises out loud. Witnesses describe it as a powerful scene, the voice steady, the tone fierce, each promise spoken like a decree. And with every declaration, the darkness from earlier seems to shrink back, losing ground that once felt impossible to reclaim. Field reports indicate that the atmosphere around the believer is changing drastically. Where fear once lingered in the corners, faith now stands guard. Where confusion once clouded the mind, clarity now burns like a torch. It's a dramatic reversal, the kind only heaven can orchestrate. Yet something far greater appears to be unfolding. Observers in the unseen realm detect movement, holy movement. It is believed that God himself is drawing nearer, responding not only to believers' invitation, but to their boldness. When a believer stands firm under fire, heaven does not remain passive. Heaven steps in. As divine presence intensifies, new patterns emerge. Thoughts align, emotions settle, strength increases. It's as if God is rewriting the internal landscape, not gently, but swiftly, decisively. The transformation is too precise to be coincidence. It is intervention. Meanwhile, the shadows that attempted to destabilize the believer earlier seem to recognize a shift. Analysts report signs of retreat, hesitant, reluctant, but undeniable. This is the moment in warfare when the enemy realizes the tide has turned, and that it is no longer the hunter, but the hunted. A message from the believer's spirit rises, stronger than before, echoing like a headline across the unseen realm. If God is with me in the storm, then the storm has limits, and God has none. The word spread like wildfire, igniting confidence and scattering doubt. Eyewitnesses describe the scene as a turning point, a pivot, a moment of divine recalibration, where the believer steps out of fear and into authority, out of trembling and into victory. This is not just survival anymore. This is takeover. Fresh reports emerge from the spiritual front line, revealing an unexpected discovery in the aftermath of the earlier battle. Beneath the rubble of fear, doubt, and pressure, investigators have uncovered something glowing, something alive, something transforming the very ground of the believer's soul. Analysts identify as purpose, long buried, long silent, now rising like fire from ashes. Correspondents embedded deep in the believer's inner world describe the moment as astonishing. As the darkness retreated in chapter 12, it exposed areas of the heart previously hidden by anxiety's shadow. Now, under new light, those areas reveal divine intention, pieces of destiny that have been covered by years of emotional debris. What felt like collapse has become revelation. Reports indicate that the believer stands motionless at first, stunned by the clarity unfolding before them. They are seeing parts of themselves they thought were gone, courage they forgot they carried, dreams they abandoned, gifts they believed had died. Yet every one of them pulses with new life, renewing itself in the presence of God. Analysts from the Spiritual Research Division conclude that this phenomenon is consistent with divine patterns. God often allows battles not to break the believer, but to expose what the believer didn't know was inside them. A holy unveiling, a purposeful excavation of the soul. What the storm shook loose, heaven now reveals with precision. Observers confirm another development. The believer is not afraid of what they see anymore. Instead, awe fills their chest, raw, expanding, overwhelming. It's the moment when suffering begins to make sense, when pain transforms in perspective, when questions lose their power because answers begin to whisper from deeper places. Sources close to the heart report a sudden shift in posture. The believer straightens, breath deepens, resolve strengthens. They are no longer inspecting ruins. They are receiving revelation. And with each revelation, authority grows. Destiny clarifies. The day no longer feels like something to survive, but something to command. Witnesses note a powerful declaration rising from believer, quiet but unmistakable. God didn't just save me from the battle. He saved something in me through the battle. The words strike the atmosphere like lightning, sending tremors through the unseen realm. Meanwhile, spiritual analysts detect rising movement, divine movement. What God revealed in the ruins appears to be awakening heaven's next sequence of plans. Doors that were locked for years begin unlocking. Pathways once clouded with confusion start clearing. What the believer lost is being replaced with something stronger, sharper, and deliberately crafted. As this transformation unfolds, remnants of fear attempt one final whisper, but it falls flat. The believer now sees too clearly. They understand that every moment of struggle carried purpose. Every tear watered something sacred. Every battle sharpened strength they would soon need.